Also, I'd like to welcome up the first speaker for the proposition to open the debate.
No matter how many comments say, "Thank you for spreading awareness," or "You're so strong for your struggles," there is always a number of other ill people who will pick up unsafe behavior, who will feel invalidated in their struggles, and who will wonder if they actually matter when we perpetuate TikTok mental health awareness platforms. So, 3 things in this debate today. Firstly, I want to take a close look at what this awareness actually looks like, what kind of people are posting these things, what kind of people are viewing them. Secondly, I want to say why TikTok mental illness awareness actually increases the harms of mental illness, increases the amount of people who struggle with it. And secondly, I want to look at why awareness about signs of mental health struggles can never be conclusive, accurate, or diagnostic on TikTok, and why that's harmful. So, firstly, let's take a close look. So, in the current day, people are becoming more open about their mental health struggles, both people who are currently struggling and people who are recovered. We also see that this is a lot of young people who are struggling with mental health, and rates of mental health issues are going up. So we on Side F think this is bad, just to be clear. We support safe, moderated mental health awareness in safe spaces like schools, like health classes, organized by organizations like Youthline, organized by organizations who have facts on the matter, who have good intentions, who exist only to educate rather than to entertain, because we think that because TikTok is a platform, that pushes entertainment, not educational stuff, that has an algorithm so it can reach, it can target people, and because TikTok is a platform that's widely used, it can never be as effective in spreading awareness about mental health as traditional forms of awareness. We think that it's very, very harmful for people to be getting their information about stuff so harmful as mental illness from a platform that doesn't have their best interests in mind. So why does TikTok awareness increase the harms of mental illness? So we see this increased rate of mental health issues right now, right? We obviously think on Side Affirmative that some of this is due to the state of the world, some of this is due to increased pressure in the modern day, and of course we believe other factors, but we do think that a catalyst in the increase of mental health issues is stuff like TikTok perpetuating narratives, perpetuating a culture of being open about mental health, and accidentally just increasing the harms of it. We think that because it seeks to entertain, and because you have to get clicks on TikTok to stay sort of afloat, the videos can never be educational, they can never be accurate. We also think that because these videos are never being posted by psychiatrists or psychologists who actually know the real harms, the real effects of mental illness, they can never be accurate, and they just are generally spread misinformation. But why is this a harm, right? So we think that with mental illnesses, especially dangerous ones like depression or eating disorders, there is always an element of competitivity in a culture of mental illness, when everyone on TikTok is talking about their struggle with depression, their recovery from anorexia, their story. We think that regardless of how you frame it, there always is an element of competitivity. Who is more sick? Who has the worst story? In the best scenario, you post your anorexia recovery story just wanting awareness, right? Like wanting to feel not alone, wanting other people to feel that. We don't think that these people always have bad intentions. We think that usually they're actually, like, they have these good intentions. But even with good intentions, the outcome is the same. A teenage girl is given that video by the algorithm, sees the video of someone at their worst point, thinks, I'm not thin enough, I'm not sick enough, my mental illness is not valid, and these girls' mental illness is now worsened because they were influenced by this TikTok narrative, and they see these videos as a goal, regardless of how they're painted by the poster. This is also perpetuated by the fact that TikTok is nowhere near monitored enough, so harmful and unsafe content gets through the cracks. And the thing is, even if TikTok is monitored for like explicitly harmful content, because of the nature of mental illness and how competitive it is, especially with young people who love to one-up each other, even when you have trigger warning mentions of self-harm in a video, it is never going to be enough to stop the harms of that from attacking the people who are watching it. Glamorizing mental illness is a harm because it increases the amount of mental illness, but it also is a harm because it creates this culture of like, I have the worst story. No, I do. No, I do. And because it's TikTok and because TikTok wants clicks, they're always going to push the horror stories and the really, really upsetting, harmful content because they need the clicks. And then people who struggle less than that always end up feeling invalidated, always feeling like don't deserve to get help. And that also comes up under my next point. But regardless, we think that because of the narrative of like competitivity and mental illness, and regardless of how it's framed, this is always going to be a harm, and people are always going to end up trying to one-up each other. Like, we think that TikTok awareness crosses the line between like educational content and actually stuff that's just harmful genuinely, regardless of what people's intentions were when posting it, because it's always how it impacts the viewers rather than the intention behind it, regardless of its awareness, but it's actually terrible. My story with depression quickly turns into, I was doing this when I was at my lowest. I looked like this when I was most depressed. And it turns into a goal for people. It perpetuates a culture of acceptance, posting and getting 1 million likes instead of real awareness that indicates how illness can ruin lives. We think that this narrative is unacceptable. We think that it's better to get this information from professionals who know what they're doing. When a culture of one-upping is formed, because A, there's a competitivity aspect to illness, and B, like, normal social media incentives are still acting and people still want likes, there is simply an increase of unsafe content perpetuating this narrative TikTok form that mental health issues are to be glamorized, and we just can't support that. So secondly, awareness about signs of mental health of mental health issues can never be conclusive, accurate, or diagnostic. So we believe firmly on side affirmative that the only people who can like educationally talk about mental health issues are those who have like a degree in it, who are like educated on it, who haven't just been through their struggles and now think that they can tell people what ADHD looks like, what depression looks like, so that people aren't seeing this 10 signs you have ADHD, recognizing one of them, going to a psychologist, and then using up this like putting more strain on the mental health system than there already is when they don't actually need to be there. We don't think that these people have bad intentions. We don't think that they're bad actors. We just think that they're confused because of this information that they digest daily about what mental health issues look like, about what mental illness looks like, all of this contradicting information that causes them to think that they have something that they don't. This goes the other way as well. When someone with a mental illness sees a video and doesn't recognize themselves in it, they're immediately going to think, oh no, what's going on? Why aren't I like this person? Why is my mental health issue not as bad as this person? It just ends up being a cycle of you have it or you don't, and people get confused either way because the information that is being posted is not accurate, because it never can be, because TikTok is a public platform where anyone can post whatever they want. Thank you.
Now may hear next speaker for that speech, and now we'll hear from the first speaker for the opposition.
Okay, we all good? Despite the massive growths in mental health awareness, many people are still left to suffer in silence. They get no support because of the mischaracterization of their mental illness, labeling them as lazy and useless. They cannot get the help and support networks they need. Few points of rebuttal before I head in by substantive material. First, on what awareness actually is. What we heard down the line was that awareness looks like they'd much rather prefer these organizations like schools, like these specific mental health organizations to push what it actually means. We disagree with this completely because firstly, they've agreed with us that we need this mental health awareness, right? By simply telling us that these organizations are going to do it in their stead. But no, that there's not enough of these mental health organizations to push this what mental health actually is and to inform the populace. I mean, you literally do it for 1 week during school, maybe 4 or 5 periods on mental health. There's simply not enough. Secondly, people don't relate to these organizations. People aren't going to listen oftentimes in school. People don't go out looking for these organizations. We think it's much easier when they find it naturally. Thirdly, they simply can't reach the same amount, right? This is a numbers game. Far more people are on TikTok. Far more people are using it. On their next point on how it creates harm, firstly, the fact that it can never be educational and that TikTok is purely for entertainment is completely just disingenuous. A lot of TikToks are educational, and to say that there are no mental health experts on TikTok is a complete mischaracterization of the act. I mean, look at Dr. Mike. He's out of New York. He talks about mental health. He's a doctor. He's studied. He went to med school. And secondly, there are fact checkers. You see them a lot on TikTok. Now, note for the third point about how it can never be diagnostic, a lot of this will be integrated. I'll point it out when we get to it. So what does their world look like? It looks like no TikToks about mental health content. We support a world in which individuals are consuming and making this content. So burden for today, either we get far more awareness on our side or that it's actually beneficial to the creators sharing their experience. That's how we win today. 4 points today then. Firstly, how we remove stigma from mental health content. Secondly, how we get a more informed populace around mental health. Thirdly, how creators benefit from sharing their experiences. Luca will cover how we get better mental health reform on our side of the house. Firstly, on how we remove stigma because of mental health content. So what does stigma look like? It looks like individuals who don't want to associate with these mental health conditions because they don't want to feel ostracized because there's social pressure to conform and be normal and fit in. Secondly, it looks like people not wanting to speak out of it publicly because what I've just told you, again, they want to be normal. They don't want to talk about it. Thirdly, it's people being seen as incompetent. It's people not being hired because they have these mental health conditions. Fourthly, it's individuals, because of these points, it's individuals suffering in silence. It's individuals not getting the help they need. So how does mental health content remove these stigmas? Firstly, exposure, right? This is a simple numbers game. When they see a TikTok, because there's so many of them, they're being exposed to these conditions that they won't regularly be exposed to. TikToks make things important. Mental health is extremely important. Note that even if it's a misinformed TikTok, the algorithm works. If you're engaging with something, you're going to see the flip side of it. You're going to look at the comments that might be disagreeing with it. You're going to see the experts. If somebody's just being completely disingenuous about what a mental health condition actually is for views, you're going to have people calling them out. If you engage with that content, you're likely to see the other side of the story. That's how we hold people accountable and don't end up with a misinformed populace. On the comparative, again, there's little to no exposure. Schools do little to nothing. You have to go out and seek these mental health organizations to be informed. We think that's really harmful. We need to be actively pushing this onto people. Secondly, real people are talking about it, right? This is deeply personal. The harms of these conditions isn't desensitized. When you go into a medical journal, right, you're gonna read about it and it's gonna be objective. It's gonna be extremely scientific. But what are people gonna relate more to? It's when a young girl goes up and says, "I had depression. I felt terrible about myself. I struggle with my body," and that's really, really good for people because it humanizes the condition. People can empathize with her, and people can be heard. And on the comparative, where they don't see this content, right? Again, you just get these schools saying, guys, mental health awareness is bad. But okay, so what? We need to humanize these conditions so we can normalize it. We can desensitize people to them so they don't feel ostracized about these conditions. Thirdly, we're more likely to engage with more content. When somebody likes this content that I've described as largely positive, they're likely to see more of these conditions. They're likely to be exposed to more of them. More exposure is good because it removes stigma, as I'm about to describe. So what does this mean for society? Firstly, we get discourse about these conditions, right? They're discussing these experiences. People are discussing whether they might have gone through the same things. This means that people are aware, they're supporting, they're donating to these conditions. Secondly, it leads to the normalization of these conditions. All this discourse means that we're going to get less stigma. When we can have an open conversation about things, people aren't going to stigmatize people because of it, because it's seen as normal. This is so positive because people are open about these issues. Like, on a social level, it just means people are like nice to their friends. People are nice to others who might have that condition, right? But on a societal level, it looks like people not ostracizing people, like over hiring people, or like donations to movements over their careers and not moving them up because they might have had mental conditions in the past. Even if the characterization of this condition is wrong, that's what we heard down the line. Like, they're aware of it now, right? It's normalized, and there's an open pathway to educate people further on this, because now they're aware of it, because more people are getting tested. Like, when they go get tested, they can be told, actually, no, you don't have this condition. And we think that's really positive because, again, they're just getting more educated. On the comparative, no discourse, incredible amounts of stigma. Secondly, how do we get more informed populace around mental health? So what's the nature of these mental health conditions? It's like a massive spectrum, right? It appears differently in everyone. There are different effects of it, and the average person defines it simply because they have limited cognition. When they view these journals, it's like a set criteria you need because that's what they use, but it's like simplifying a very complicated issue for them. So how do we get a more misinformed populace because of this TikTok content? Firstly, they see different people with the condition. These people have had different experiences. They're sharing them. And the comparative is we don't get this diversity. You just get a cookie cutter version of a condition, which is really harmful because they're simplifying it, and oftentimes it's wrong. And you have to stay consistent with that model, and you can't push outside of it and see the full spectrum of people who've suffered from this condition. Secondly, we get increased amounts of discourse, right? Look at the comment sections. We get different perspectives. Like I've already told you, health experts are on these apps. They're more likely to talk about it and just point out things and inconsistencies in people's stories if they're just being completely disingenuous about their stories. And note that most people do have common sense. We think that most people aren't just going to go, oh, I must be depressed because maybe 1 hour thing, I felt sad on a random day, right? We think that most people do have this common sense. And this is a mischaracterization of people on their side of the house. Thirdly, we get experts who talk about it, right? because these psychologists and psychiatrists, they want to educate people. Firstly, secondly, they care a lot. They're in the field for a reason. Thirdly, it's their reputation, it's their career. They want these likes. They want to have a reputation on these apps. It's really good for their firms, their industry. So they post this content too, and they're not just and they're experts, right? This is incredibly important. So what does this mean? This means that firstly, people who do have this condition are able to find more information about it. They're able to get diagnosed. That's incredibly beneficial. Secondly, people who have a different condition are more likely to go to a doctor, maybe think they have that one, and if it's similar, they can get diagnosed for what they actually have. Thirdly, and importantly, people who don't have it, they're not gonna do anything about it. I've already described to you, if a 12-year-old thinks they have depression, that's extremely harmful in the short term. But what's worse than that is nobody knowing what depression even is, completely stigmatizing people for their mental health. That's so harmful. We would much rather somebody suffer the short-term consequences rather than all of society completely stigmatize the entire populace who suffers from this. So proud to oppose.
I'd like to be the speaker for that speech, and I'll hear from the sitting speaker for the proposition.
Creating a culture with safe, accurate, and positive discussion around mental health is pushed out, is not something we can support. Very happy to regret that. 3 questions for you today. Firstly, what are the effects on people with mental health issues, with a split here on what are the effects on people who are sharing these stories? Secondly, and what are the effects on people who without strong mental health disorders, and integrating the model throughout. So firstly, on this first question, right, the main thing we hear from the mitigating team is that people will be more aware of their mental health issues, right? They tell us because they'll like be able to like see like people talking about depression, right? We don't think this engages with like a lot of what we told you at first, right? We told you that actually we do have the ability to have like positive awareness, like from groups like that are, like trained mental health professionals who can like go into schools, right? The only things we heard against this is like it's like 1 week a year, so that's like not going to influence you. We actually think that the only reason like that's not going to like form your perception of like how like what mental health is from these experts is when every day of the year you are getting from TikTok like this other like perception of what mental health looks like that is not coming from mental health experts, right? We think that if what mental health education looks like for you is that 1 week, like a 1 week a year of school, right? And that is accurate and safely delivered information, that is really positive on our side of the house. We're really happy to support that, right? The only thing I heard told us against this is that actually there are like mental health experts on TikTok, right? Two things against this. Firstly, we think that predominantly the kind of discourse that like goes through TikTok, so the thing that is getting like the most engagement, which are like the horror stories, right? Like the things that are like the sharing this is my story, like, or like the things that are like made to fit the algorithm. We think that like generally like these people are not able to meet that when they're like having to like maintain like good standards of like things. Inherently they have to sacrifice something to clickbait their audience or to like keep their audience like from scrolling, right? Which cheapens their message. Secondly, even when they do manage to get through the cracks, it like is overwhelmed by the sheer amount of content that is being posted from normal people who like do not have that training and even intentionally or not are like spreading disinformation, right? That we really didn't hear much like back from this like either, right? Where like you have people who are like denying the fact that they might have mental illness because they are receiving like huge amounts of disinformation. This clearly looks like here are 10 signs you might have ADHD. If you do not like fit those signs that might not actually be like the accurate diagnostic signs, you are likely to like take that in and think, hey, I probably don't have ADHD, and are unlikely to seek the help that you might genuinely need, which means that people who would like traditionally be able to like go and like seek help are like discouraged from that. That's something we can't support on the other side of the house. The next thing we heard like is it like normalizes mental health, right? We actually don't think that's like what we want in this debate. What we want is people to be aware of mental health and be able to like get and receive the help, not to create a culture in which people think it is normal to have mental health. When people talk like are prevalently like talking about their stories, and when people are like talking about their stories as if like that they are not like normal, like that is like part of like what the culture is, people are actually less likely to go and engage with help because they think that is something they think that is like something that is like more acceptable, not something like we think people should be aware of the pernicious harms, which we think happens when you like engage with people and talk about it in like a safe and productive way and how to get that help, which we think counselors and psychiatrists can do. And we think you actually like cheapen their message when you like push it against a whole bunch of inaccurate, harmful information, right? Also, but we actually think what is the purpose of awareness in general is we think it allows people to go seek help, right? So even if you have to go seek help, so even if you have people being able to like recognize that they have mental illness more on their side, they will be less able to access the limited resources that exist in the world because of a large number of people who are now like self-diagnosing or trying to who typically do not need this help, like taking over those resources because they have like seen the inverse of like which we told you, like 10 signs you have ADHD. They meet one like a couple of them, and so they decide to go and get a diagnosis or like to take up like those resources, which we like don't think as good either. And the final thing we heard is it like humanizes mental health, and that like mental health becomes like seen as like more relatable generally things, right? We actually think this is again ties directly into a material around like how like when you like when you've got like this humanizing, inherently like you are like trying to like be like one up like these other people in terms of like when you have a system like TikTok that connects your mental health, when you're sharing your mental health to the number of likes you get, right? It clearly shows when like you want to have like a more harmful mental illness because it gets more vision, more traction, more likes. It inherently like puts a incentive for people to be part of that. So people like desire, like want to be sicker. We actually think that is like terrible and something that like happens when like because of this culture of like sharing mental health, right? So what like this is my split here on like what like the effects on people sharing is, right? We think that because of this new pressure to conform to sharing your struggle, it means that people who typically would be like better off not doing so are now like forced to share the struggle. No, thank you. And it like opens them up to vitriol when they post this from the internet on like that will actually exacerbate the harms for these very vulnerable people. Right. This is actually like a range of good to bad. We think that some in the worst cases this looks like people on the internet like actively being like mean and spreading like hate. Right. To like feel better about themselves. Right. But even when it's like good actors talking about like specific like issues, like we actually think that this can just like because of the free-flowing nature, like when it's not trained professionals, this can actually exacerbate people like harms here more. I'll take it away.
So everyone everyone suffers to some degree from mental health issues. Why shouldn't we normalize these issues to remove the stigma attached?
This actually takes me on to my next point on the like effect on people without mental health without strong mental health disorders, right? Like who have like generally everyday mental health. We think that TikTok inherently, because it hides like the thing that gets seen are the most like the most horrific stories, the ones that will get the most engagement, the most likes, which we told you at first has gone unrebutted. It means that the entire conversation around mental health occurs on like these most like dangerous like aspects of this, and actually disregards everyday mental health issues that we think are really important, right? Everyone feels sad and everyone needs to go and like engage with us and be able to like talk about this, receive help. But when like the entire conversation occurs around like only the most extreme cases, it actually makes people feel like their struggles are invalid, which we think is absolutely something we cannot support. We also think for these people without mental health, it can cause people to self-diagnose in things which we think is really harmful, because then we heard like they have like people like have common sense, right? We actually think that's generally true in under status quo, but when you are being bombarded with information that is inaccurate, telling you that you do have mental health issues, we actually think this will like going to like exacerbate that harm, and like for people that are like in the majority of cases to not seek help for their less extreme things. So what have we told you today? We've told you that for people with mental health issues, they become less aware or like more like not aware in like the way that matters and less able to access resources. And for people with like everyday mental health issues, they also get worse. And for people sharing worse. And for those reasons, very proud to affirm.
Nanahi, I'd like to thank speakers for their speech. Now we'll hear from the second speaker for the opposition.
Yes. Isn't that different? No, I've got it.
In New Zealand, we have the highest suicide rates in youth in the entire world. And yet, what the affirming team wants to tell you is that we shouldn't be normalizing mental health. We should instead shut it out, restrict it to only these organizations. They're the only ones who can talk about it. Nobody else should be able to talk about it. Why do we think that's not working? We'll just look at the statistics in the status quo, right? We have a severe mental health crisis. We have a major problem. The way that we can best address that is to remove the stigma, is to normalize these conditions. Okay, 4 points in the speech. 3 points of clash. First of all, on why there's no other good awareness pathways. Second of all, why viewers benefit from TikTok awareness posts. Third of all, how creators benefit from sharing their experiences. And then fourthly, a split on how we get better mental health reform on our side of the house. Cool. First of all, why are there no other good awareness pathways? What do we hear from affirmative here? No, this is a regrets debate, and so it is their burden to prove like why the comparative world is better without these TikToks. So what does this comparative world look like in their eyes? It looks like the only awareness that is being given out for these mental health conditions is from Youthline, these trained organizations, right? These are not places that people can connect to. A key difference between mental health and physical health is that mental health is so much more vulnerable to go to a specialist about your mental health than it is about your physical health because it's so much more personal, right? The only way that people can get like proper treatment and get proper awareness is if they trust the people who they're going to, right? Okay. So the only options here for these organizations is that firstly, they get it from the school. Secondly, they seek it out themselves. Why are both of these bad? Firstly, if they seek it out from their school, there's a lot of peer pressure around them with their other students, like they're not likely to want to engage with the content. Secondly, a lot of the time kids don't like their school, so they're not going to like the stuff that their school is putting forward towards them. Thirdly, because there's such a short amount of time that they have access to these like organizations, they can't get a good enough education. Now, so people can't connect, can't trust these people if they come into their schools. How else are they able to seek out these people if they go and do their own research? Well, firstly, because a lot of the time this is behind a screen. Like if it's like a Youthline online chat service, that's what people will most likely default towards because then they don't have to be as vulnerable. But that's behind a screen. There's no connection there. Like how are they supposed to really actually get like the real life experiences from those people? They can't. Secondly, because these organizations are hard to find, we're not told enough about these organizations in school. Sure, maybe we're told once a year, like for 1 week, that's not enough. But thirdly, because they're not likely to seek that stuff out themselves, like they have, their youth, like they have school, they have all these other responsibilities. Mental health isn't always their priority, right? What do we get on our side then? We get some awareness, regardless of like, if we can prove to you whether that awareness is misinformed, whether that awareness is like not like concretely proper, people know that these mental illnesses exist. It's more personal to them. Like at least if more people know that these illnesses exist, it means that more people are going to start like thinking about it. More people are going to start being sympathetic towards others that maybe have these issues. People will be like, I don't want to necessarily like be mean to you because what if you have some mental condition? Because now I know that all these mental conditions exist. There are no other good awareness pathways on their side of the house. How do you get awareness? We don't know. Now, second point of clash, how viewers benefit from technical awareness. What do we hear from them? They say there's this air of competitivity, right? But firstly, people find communities that support them, right? Like the algorithm is likely to direct people towards communities that like align with their own views, with their own beliefs. These are people who aren't likely to be attacking them and being like, my mental health is worse than yours. Like, we think that people are likely to be nice to each other on these platforms, like make online friends, that kind of thing. But secondly, because people can delete the comments, they can block, they can filter out certain words, they can turn off these comments. We're seeing like an increasing awareness of how toxic these platforms are. We're seeing an increased mobilization from these platforms to stop this, right? Like we're seeing more and more and more of this, like getting rid of this toxicity. We're seeing more and more of like people standing up against toxicity. We think that like it's worth it for this awareness. What do they say here? They also say that people see these TikToks as a goal to look towards. Like they'll see an anorexic person, now they go, I want to be anorexic. First of all, let me know that they didn't mechanize this at all. Like how do they make that link between people seeing a TikTok and people wanting to become like that person who's having that mental health condition? But why is this not true? Because firstly, in these TikToks, they're often told how bad this is. They're told like, this is not something you should be like trying to act towards. The people actively don't want other people to go through the same stuff as they did. But secondly, because people are likely to empathize with these people, they're not going to be like, they're going to feel sympathy for them. That doesn't mean that they're going to want to do what they're doing. But thirdly, because people just generally don't want to be unhappy. There's no incentive for these people to go and get those conditions and become like them. What else do they say here? They say that we shut out mild conditions in favor of only severe ones, right? But here's the thing. There are multiple things that get clicks. It's not just severity. It's not just like the wow factor. Okay. Or another thing that gets a lot of clicks is relatability, right? We think that most people are likely to relate more to these people like talking more about the mild conditions because more people experience that on a day-to-day life. This gets clicks. Sure, so does the severe stuff, but we're actually getting like awareness of both of these issues. We're not shutting out either of them. You see often when you go on TikTok, people will just like talk about like kind of very generic, like soft mental health issue. It's not that like radical. People are likely to talk about it. So like, even if you can believe that there's only conversation about these severe issues, it's still more than they're proposing to you on their side of the house. We're still getting some conversation, some awareness, even if it is only about these severe issues. We really need this awareness and this education. We need people to start talking about mental health issues so that they can feel like they can go forward, they can like speak up about it, and they can go and maybe get diagnosed. Third point of clash, how creators benefit from sharing these experiences, right? These creators are like, they're humans, they're diverse, right? Sharing this experience is really beneficial because they get to unload, right? There's this catharsis of like verbalizing your issues, regardless of whether they get any real support from that, regardless of whether they get any hate from that, at least they get to speak about it. A lot of the time, if they're on TikTok in the first place, and they're like common creators in the first place, it probably means that they might not necessarily have a robust support network in their own lives. So sometimes TikTok is the only way where they can get that catharsis of unloading, right? But like they are likely to get support from other people, from their peers. I've already told you how they're likely to be diverted into algorithms of people who share their similar views, right? People will reach out, conversations are started. This is more likely to happen on social media because there's like less of a barrier of like going up to someone and social anxiety when you can just text them and it's like you could just not talk to them again if it goes wrong, you know? People are more likely to reach out, right? We don't think they're likely to receive hate. We think the outcome of this is that these creators will feel happy. They feel like they've unloaded, you know, this is a burden off their shoulders to be able to do this. I'll take a POI before my split.
Why do you prefer awareness when it comes in the form of disinformation and like falsity?
Okay, because we think that like this awareness, regardless of whether it's like what that leads to then is more like education after that point. We also told you how we don't think it is misinformation. We're just saying like even if you believe that, we told you at first how people see that like these issues have a wide spectrum. They see that like it's more likely, we see that the organizations on your side of the house have a very strict criteria for what they think these mental health conditions look like, whereas that's not the truth in reality. Onto my split. So they talk about how like only those with a degree should be able to talk about these conditions. But really, since they got their degree, so much has changed in the mental health world, right? Like, this system is systematically flawed. We don't know anything about the brain. Like, MRI scans have only just recently came out. Like, we thought homosexuality was a mental health condition not that long ago. Like, you know, people can try to treat these conditions as box-ticking criteria, like physical health conditions. They're not like that at all. So what happens as a result of these TikToks? We told you we get normalization. This means people will go to get diagnosed. This gives more accurate data to scientists of what happens. We told you about education. So even if there is misinformation there, experts will have a way now to see where are the gaps in the knowledge, because they're seeing, okay, this is where people are being misinformed. This is where people have the wrong idea. So now they can spread their awareness better. But what we get actually is more diversity in the mental health system. Minorities are finally reached on TikTok because it's someone who's like them on that TikTok. They're not likely to see that with these organizations. So they're likely to go get diagnosed. Well, the outcomes of this are that like, if the people are misdiagnosing more frequently, maybe they might reform that diagnosis criteria to account for more diverse idea of what these mental health issues are. We get diagnosis reform, we get awareness reform. Science needs to rapidly account for everyone to address this massive crisis we have. They get no reform. So proud to propose.
Now we hear let's take a speaker for their speech, and now we'll hear from the third speaker for the propositions.
Hey, are you okay? How has your day been? These are the messages that are lost when we jump immediately to the extremes that we see gain traction on social media. In today's debate, we have seen 3 points of clash. The first being what leads to better mental health awareness. The second lead being what leads to directly better mental health. And thirdly, what side clogs up an already overburdened system less. Now, I'm going to firstly talk about like what each team needs to prove to win. Fundamentally, what both teams want is improved mental health. That the winning side will prove they get better mental health, like aggregately. On side F, we've told you the way we're going to do this is show you the harms that TikTok mental health awareness carries have the most impact in today's debate, while side NEG are trying to tell you the harms with a lack of knowledge are the most impactful. So understanding this, we can move on to our first point of clash, what leads to better mental health awareness. So this has been the big push we've heard from side NEG. The idea we had is we remove away mental health as broadcasted. Now, we firstly told you there are like safe forms we would prefer to be delivered instead, like schools, where there is experts doing this, and it is a safe space where people are with their peers, with the friends, with the people who can support them, rather than in their home alone in more vulnerable scenarios. The only response we had to about this specific example, I'm going to go on later about how mental health awareness mechanisms are more wider than the NEG team has tried to tell you. They've just said it's only a small chunk of time, say 1 week. The reason why we tell you this 1 week or this amount of time has so little impact is because people see mental health problems every single day. Because people are flooded with mental health content on TikTok. When they hear these lectures, they are so used and so made up their mind about what mental health issues look like that they're not willing to listen. And that's what we see as a bigger problem. We think it is more important that people are getting accurate content and that they can actually link to their real world. We also tell you, on TikTok, there is so much clash about what mental health disorders look like. What does ADHD look like? What does depression look like? What does anxiety look like? Since there is so much clash, there is not a clear method of broadcasting these issues like the NEG team tries to paint it. Now, the NEG has also tried to say we have a lack of discourse, trying to only box us into school talks. But we actually think that's a mischaracterization of what we're trying to tell you. School is an example of the ways mental health awareness can be done. We think methods like the news, methods from trusted members of your family and your friends are also impactful that they haven't considered. And that is how we know that New Zealand has one of the worst youth suicide rates, because of what the news tells us. There are indeed other forms where mental health is discussed in a more informative, a more academic way, and a way that can include the most people in discussion. So we ultimately think it's been really narrowing down this debate by just saying education, even though it's just one example we've given. One last response we heard from SideNEG is that you cannot connect with people in your school as much as you connect with TikTokers. But we firstly tell you, we haven't had any mechanisms as to why people connect with TikTokers. We don't see that a person can connect as easily as someone from America, as much as they can connect to their own peers, to people in their own country. We haven't really heard why people really do connect with these TikTokers. Indeed, we think you can connect to those who you trust the best, your friends, who you talk to, and who you can get the most relevant information about your scenario
Point of information.
and mental health awareness. We tell you this point of clash has slightly lower weight because both sides clearly have mechanisms that lead to mental health awareness in society. At minimum, we at least have some, but we think we have we have a lot. What it shows you is there is still going to be discourse under AF world and under NEG world, and that will exist under both sides. That's why we've won that point of clash, and I'll accept the POI now.
The DSM-5 criteria has hundreds of ways some of these illnesses can present with symptoms. Does these TikTok trends not help show how different people present these symptoms differently?
What the TikTok trend is that I know what these symptoms are. These are 10 signs you have ADHD. It's what people look at those and see, this is how I should act. This is how my mental health disorders should act. That's how people respond. They don't know that there's that whatever index. People just see these are the mental health issues that are associated with what I think I have. Now, this really well leads us to what leads to directly better health. Now, we told you quite a lot of points, and we'd like to note none of these were really engaged with until second NEG, which makes it a bit harder for me to work here. We told you a lot about competition, how people naturally like to out-harm people on social media and compare their experiences. I think the response we had is that people are nicer than you think and people can find communities on TikTok. But still, it doesn't do anything to deal with the mechanisms we told you at Teresa, that people are still comparing their experiences, still comparing their BMIs to another person's BMIs when they have anorexia. That is going to happen when it's been broadcasted by so many different people. So we don't think they've addressed with that. Nor have they really addressed with our 2 lines of analysis about people who don't fit in with the symptoms and feel ostracized because this mental health issue isn't related to them, nor have they really engaged to our stuff about self-diagnosis and how it's making people think they have a mental health disorder when they may actually not, because indeed it's not experts telling us this. We also had no response to what James told you at Split, that TikTok really goes to the extreme. The majority of people have more daily mental health concerns, having bad days, and we think that is forgotten in TikTok. That is not part of TikTok discourse because it jumps to what gets clicked, what gets likes, what gets comments, what gets intentions, and that is often the most gripping thing, and we think that's forgotten, undersized. NEG, We also told you about how like comments are really harmful, about like how there's so much disagreement, like you don't actually have this order, you're wrong. The response we had to that as well, people can block it. But remembering the people with these disorders have a mental health disorder and they're in a very vulnerable time. Seeing even one hate comment might make a significant difference to their life because they are already having significant mental struggles. We don't think it's easy for them to just block it and forget it when they do have such like complicated mental issues. But we also think, like, since TikToks can go viral, we don't think it's easy for someone to control all the comments. Now, we think this point of clash is the highest. It links most directly to the burden of each team. It links to who improves mental health and who doesn't improve mental health the closest. And that's why we need to weight this point of clash the highest and what's substantive we told you. Now, I'm going to finally tell you what side clogs up an already overburdened system more. And we haven't really had much engagement from Side NEG about this. It is agreed that we probably don't have enough professionals, not enough placements in universities for like master's psychology programs, not enough trained psychologists. And if so, they're all going to like a private system because that's where the money is. There's not like less publicly available resources. We told you real harms of like self-diagnosis, of what we're talking about when people include themselves in a bracket is flooding the system even further, going to a psychologist because of what they saw on TikTok. Indeed, not only does this like take that psychologist's spot away from someone else, but it might encourage that psychologist to like stay in a private system if they're able to garner like so many customers or so many patients. Overall, it takes our discourse to an overburdened system, and we think like even if mental health is aware, people cannot seek help under the current status quo because there's not enough. Thank you.
And now we hear from the speaker who wants to attend.
The affirming team in this debate really drove home how great these psychologists are at their jobs, how they are the perfect people for mental health things. So I'm going to quickly address that first, is what are the awareness pathways in this debate? We have offered you the TikTok route, and they've offered you the psychologist route. And so these are the three things that they have given you in this debate. They've said that this education best comes from psychologists, schools, and organisations like Youthline. First of all, SAD responded directly to this by saying that we do have a lot of educational people on TikTok by having people like psychologists and doctors who can actively share their knowledge and experience. But then we also told you at Luca that there's a lot of gaps in this medical community. And as I brought up in my point of information as well, there are so many gaps in what we know about mental health. The DSM-5, which is the manual for diagnosing these mental disorders, gives hundreds of ways that someone can present with depression. Every single person on TikTok who gives their view of my experience with depression is likely going to be presenting a different version of it because it's creating a realistic version. It's not just a bunch of boxes in that if you check them all, then you've got it. What they're presenting is this is my experience, these are my symptoms, and it actually gives more education. They also told us that schools are the best, but we responded directly to this as well by saying that schools are not the best place for this because they don't have the resources, they don't have the time, they have other things to teach students other than mental health, all right? They don't have enough time other than that 1 week a year, which isn't enough. We need that constant reminders from places like TikTok where people are reminded that mental health is a big issue and how it actually affects people, all right? They also brought up the point about how we don't have enough resources. But then they said that we should have psychologists going into these schools to educate people, and we're not entirely sure where they get the resources for that and for organisations like Youthline to educate people, as well as actually be able to treat people who do have this condition. So, two main points of clash in this debate
On
is
that.
first of all, how does this affect the viewers? And second of all, how does this affect creators? Under the viewers' side, which Team F has said that that's the most important side, but we've told you that even if there may be harms, there's also exponential benefits to the creators of these videos. So if we can prove either of these points of clash, we win the debate. First of all, how does this affect the viewers? F told you that it increases harms, that TikTok is a catalyst for mental health disorders, that can never be accurate, that there's a competitive nature and there's glamorization of this. First of all, we think that this decreases harms, and we've proved this to you, is that when people share their experiences, they can get support networks, they can find community on TikTok, they can have people to support them, and that means that when their depression gets really bad, instead of spiraling further and further, they can reach out to their support networks that they've now found. They can message a friend, hey, I'm not feeling too great, and then they can actually get the support that they need. Second of all, TikTok videos do not cause physical changes in brain chemistry or brain functions, all right? TikTok videos do not cause depression or ADHD, all right? These things have actual physical effects. With their theories that depression is caused by neurotransmitters. It is by dopamine, not enough dopamine or serotonin in the brain. It's cognitive functions. It's things that happen and trauma in their lives. None of these things they're getting from TikTok, all right? They're not getting massively serotonin depletion and actual physical changes to their brain chemistry from TikTok. So we entirely reject this point that TikTok is a catalyst and is causing more people to have ADHD and to become depressed, all right? Thirdly, Sad already spoke about psychologists, and I've already gone over it. Fourth, I talked about all the ways that depression manifests, that all these things manifest and present different symptoms. This means that different people have different experiences that are not always shown by the medical community. What it is shown is by these individuals on TikTok who share their experiences, who share their unique things that may not be in the lists of what happens, but it is what happened to them. And it's so important that we're sharing this. All right? Fifth, the big push in this debate was that competitivity on TikTok is very detrimental. So here are responses to this. First of all, worst case scenario on our side is that we still get awareness. Even if perhaps there's a few people who do get worse mental health conditions, we still get more awareness. We still get people going to psychologists and being like, I think that I'm in a really bad headspace and I think I need help. It means that they're going to people, they're saying, hey, this really triggered me and I'm not sure why, all right? Also, we also see on these TikTok platforms is people saying this is not standards to live up to. This is what happened to me. This was the worst day of my life and you should not live up to this. It is people actively speaking out against it and trying to persuade people out of these lifestyles. It's things like bulimia and they're saying, no, this is terrible. Please stop. Please get help. And it makes people realize when they're constantly seeing this, this is not okay. This is not something that they're exposed to in real life. These are not conversations being held in schools, in health sessions. These are not conversations being held at all anywhere but on TikTok, or once it gets so bad that they're hospitalized for it. They also brought up the fact that it's glamorizing it. But you know what else? It's glamorizing recovery. It's saying, look at all the progress I made. Look at everything that I've done to get up to this point. I'm so proud of myself. And then people rally behind them, say, yeah, that's so great. And then people realize, and they say, I need to get on top of this. What outcomes does this have? This has better reform in mental health industry, as Luca gave you in his split, is that people realize how different people present with different symptoms, which leads to more research to fill in the gaps of our medical knowledge. And people just get better help. This is so important because without this help, we can't get anything. Yeah.
Do you not think since there are so many boxes that define a mental health disorder that people have to think they have to fit in certain boxes when seeing certain videos on TikTok to have a mental health disorder?
Okay, there are certain boxes that you have to fit to have certain mental health disorders. That's how diagnosing it works. But the thing is, with TikTok, they show, look at all these different ones. You can have combinations of these. You don't have to have all of them, but these are some symptoms that you might not know about. And it's really important to have those conversations. So how does this affect the creators? I've tried telling you that this wasn't really important, but they brought it up anyway, about how people share when they're better off not to and they're forced into sharing. We think this is entirely false. People can choose to share their experiences, and this can actually be really beneficial for them. Because if they can't afford an actual psychologist, they can still talk about it. They can still talk about their experiences. They can still talk about how they're going with their mental illness and have people to rally up and support them. Okay? It can be really good for their healing and processing to show, and it makes them reflect on how far they've come in their recovery. And they show that to people. And then, as I said, that has a good effect on the viewers, but then that has a good effect on the creator themselves. Side gave you how this was so good for people because it benefits from sharing their experience, because we're humans, because we're diverse, because we relate. All right? This is so incredibly important in the help of awareness and healing from these mental health disorders, and that is why we have won the debate today. Thank you.
Now I'm here, I'd like to thank the speaker for that speech, and now we move to the replies portion of the debate, so I'd like to welcome back the Leader of the Opposition. You're giving a reply, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do you have it? Oh, no. Yeah, I get it. Oh, okay. Sorry.
We told you at SARD that we have a huge problem with mental health stigma, people not feeling like they can come forward about their issues, and mental health awareness, people not knowing about the severity of mental health issues, people not knowing about the nuance of mental health issues. Negating haven't denied that there's a problem with this, so what they had to prove in this debate was that there were other viable options for youth to get this awareness, to get this education, to break down these stigma, these barriers, in order for people to get help for the problems that they so severely face. We won this debate when they failed to provide those other viable options. So, 3 points of clash here. Firstly, why there are no other viable, valid awareness pathways, right? This is key. What did they propose here? They proposed these organizations, and let's please note that at second, their whole case was about these organizations all they said was through schools. That was pretty much their only case here, right? At schools, we told you that people aren't going to connect with these organizations when it's in schools. We told you people won't feel like they can be vulnerable within their schools. We told you about all the peer pressure that gets involved there. We told you that's not viable. Secondly, the only other way that we see that they can come across these organizations was through people doing their own research. We told you that this is hard for people to do. We told you that they're unlikely to do so, right? Then they brought up at third that, oh no, we actually said there were other viable, valid access pathways. We think this came out too late in the debate to really be taken as a core to their case. We heard the news and people's family, right? I think we implicitly respond to this at SARD when we tell you that these TikTok videos are where they're basically humanizing these conditions. They're connecting people to these conditions. They're relatable to people because they're people are seeing their peers. There's peers that are suffering these conditions. The news and the family, we already implicitly responded to that at SARD. We're they don't follow that criteria as well. They're not connecting to people. They're not humanizing the issues. So what do we get? We get some awareness at least, right? At the very minimum, if you take them at their best, we still get some awareness. This awareness is so important, right? Even if people are misdiagnosed, at least they're trying to help themselves somehow. At least they know that they have some issues and they're trying to make a difference there. On their side, they have no pathways to awareness that's actually connecting to youth. Youth are the problem here. Youth are the most vulnerable to mental health conditions. They're the ones we need to be connecting to. TikTok does that the best. Now, secondly, how does this benefit viewers of these videos? Their push here was that people, this is such a competitive system, people will compare themselves to others. We told you that algorithms will lead people to safe communities, right? And in these safe, like they'll lead you to like safe communities, places that agree with your beliefs. These communities aren't likely to be the ones that are sending all these hate comments to the people. But more importantly, what we do is we show the nuance of these mental health issues. Mental health is not a cookie cutter thing, right? It's so different to physical health, where like it's going to appear pretty much the same in every person. Mental health is completely different. There's such a wide spectrum because we have like on one hand it's the internal like thoughts and feeling stuff. On the other hand, it's how that translates to behavior. There's so many different links there, so many different ways that it can appear differently in different people. We show on our side that it has variety by exposing people to like a broad spectrum of what it looks like in different people, the different ways that this mental health can occur. What we do is we inherently, like, we don't have this competition because people see, oh, there are other people like me. There are other people that are worse than me. There are some people who aren't as worse than me, and all of these people are getting the same kind of support. They all deserve to be cared for, right? We show that these issues are layered and that they look different. The other thing they say here is that we get an overload of the system, but what they haven't responded to was our split second, in that we tell you that the system is inherently like so flawed because we don't know enough about these issues. Like, we don't know where this misinformation is coming from. What we get as a result of these TikTok videos, at the very least, is now like, because of all this discourse around like what's the misinformation, where's this misinformation coming from, now the scientists and these professionals, they know what the misinformation is coming from. They know how to best target their awareness campaigns. They know how to reform the system to better treat minorities. They can reform that system that's already flawed, right? What do we get on this side of the house? We get people who don't suffer.
I'd like to thank the speaker for that speech, and now to close the debate, I'd like to welcome back the proposition of five speakers.
What is the purpose of awareness if it does not help people to heal? Why does the negative prefer a world where people end up sicker because they are shown thousands of videos of people struggling more than them and feel that they must get worse to deserve any attention or any help from the system? Why does AF prefer a world where people suffer? We don't know. So, I think that this debate has largely revolved around two things, right? First of all, the awareness that currently there is around mental health and how that can be improved and if it needs to be improved. And then secondly, the direct outcomes on mental health from either side. So, firstly, on stigma. What we heard from the negating side is that the awareness that we get from TikTok reduces our society's collective stigma against mental health. And they tried to tell you that we don't have a pathway to this awareness on our side because people don't like their schools, so they won't go to the counselor. Because people need someone relatable. Because people need to connect with the person. But we say that actually connection often looks a lot like comparison. Connection often looks a lot like harm, and community often looks a lot like a bunch of mentally ill teenagers who are extremely impressionable and extremely vulnerable, bouncing off of each other in an echo chamber. We told you that this TikTok narrative of pushing the most extreme traumatic stories so that they get clicks is actually too harmful for it to be worth the small amount of misinformative awareness that the NEG pushes so strongly for. We think that talking about mental health as a commodity, to have something like this discourse that they've so strongly advocated for, is actually really harmful. That mental health is a serious topic that we shouldn't be arguing over what's right and wrong, that we shouldn't have a discourse. We shouldn't be flooding TikTok with extremely traumatic stories of people's depression, of people's anorexia. We don't think that it's beneficial to anyone, especially not the posters, as the creators, as they tried to say, that it's good for them to vent out their struggles onto TikTok. We told you again and again that actually the best way for people to get help is through professionals who have been doing this for years and who don't have like the same mental illness themselves as people do on TikTok, so that these like ideas are going to bounce off of each other. We think that the best way to get help is not by telling a bunch of other mentally ill people on TikTok, but rather by telling your school counselor, by like calling Youthline, by seeking professional help, right? When you think that you have a real problem, as opposed to like something else that we saw under our side, which is that people think they have mental illness when they don't, and it floods the system. But obviously that was sort of dropped. We still think it's important. We think that what NEG says about like it's spreading awareness of, look how much I've progressed. Like they said that our content fell out about like perpetuating harmful narratives about why, like glamorizing mental health. They said that fell out because actually it was really anti-mental health issues. It was really pro-recovery, and everyone was saying, look how much I progressed. But we see on TikTok, because it is there for clicks, that look how much I progressed quickly turned into, look at my body when I was sickest, look at me in hospital because of my depression. What is the purpose of spreading awareness if it is perpetuating a narrative that you must go through extreme harm and extremely traumatic events to be valid? Doctors are drowned out on TikTok and in real life because like these sort of very like shock factor type videos are meant to get clicks instead of being educational, and so people don't actually listen to the psychologist for the 1 week of the year. We think that they don't prove their awareness point. We think that we prove it better, and we think that ultimately more people get more sick under their side of the house. Thank you.
Now here, let's take the speaker for that speech, and Mami Koso thanks everyone for that debate. I'd like to invite you to cross the floor, shake hands if you want to, and then maybe Will.
No, we can go. Don't worry.
Well done.
Nice job. Second round.
Who in a row?